Hello, and welcome to the St. Louis Art Museum's Art Speaks program. My name is Jessica Kennedy, and I'm the educator for adult learning at the museum. Before we begin, please familiarize yourself with the Q&A section located on your screen. Feel free to enter your questions at any time during the program, and we will choose a few to answer at the end. Also, there is live auto transcription available for this program. Please click the CC icon to activate or deactivate the subtitles. For today's talk, Art Speaks and You Hear Us, we are joined by Shaka Myrick, the inaugural 2-year Romare Bearden Graduate Museum Fellow. Thanks for being here today, Shaka.
Thank you, Jessica, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining me for today's program, Art Speaks and You Hear Us. I'm Shaka Myrick, the inaugural 2-year Romare Bearden Fellow here at the St. Louis Art Museum. I am honored to bring Black History Month to a close with my final Art Speaks installation. If you missed my previous talks, no sweat. You can always visit the St. Louis Art Museum's YouTube channel to watch Art Speaks But You Feel Me and See Me, along with other recorded programs. Today, I will highlight several works of art by Norman Lewis, a Black artist widely recognized as a leading member of the abstract expressionist movement during the Harlem Renaissance period. But it's his shift from realism to abstract art and his representational strategies to focus on Black urban life and community struggles that I admire most. Norman Wilfred Lewis was born on July 23rd, 1909, in the Harlem community of New York City, where he spent most of his life. He studied drawing and commercial design at the New York Vocational High School and adapted a social realist style, typically depicting problems faced by working class Americans. His perspectives on race relations broadened when he left Harlem in the late 1920s during World War II, as he traveled as a merchant seaman to South America and the Caribbean, experiencing some freedoms that weren't available in New York, but ultimately exposing him to global forms of repression at the time. Frustrated by the prejudice and discrimination he encountered as a shipfitter, Lewis was determined to battle racism and social injustice in North America. Upon his return to New York in 1933, he resumed his practice of creating social realist paintings. He worked alongside Romare Bearden and under the supervision of renowned sculptor Augusta Savage, who is the founder and director of Savage Studios of Arts and Crafts, which later became the Harlem Community Art Center. His experiences abroad in New York continued to drive Lewis to contribute to the betterment of his community, and he became very active in several cultural groups in New York. He was a founding member of the Harlem Arts Guild, which was committed to the goal of fighting for Black artists to have a legitimate place as a worthwhile force in society. In 1934, he joined Charles Alston's Studio 306, a working space, exhibition venue, and intellectual forum for Black artists. Studio 306 doubled as a meeting space for the likes of Romare Bearden, Ralph Ellison, and a very young Jacob Lawrence, and other artists who were committed to staying involved in campaigns for the Black arts movement, and ultimately securing the bag to support the artists and promote their work. In addition to advocating for artists' pay, Norman Lewis contributed to his community as an art teacher for the Works Progress Administration in the 1930s. The WPA Federal Art Project was the largest program of its time, establishing more than 100 community centers throughout the country, especially for women and people of color, and creating opportunities for these workers during the Great Depression. Actually, the St. Louis Art Museum received its first works by African-American artists thanks to a large gift from the WPA. Now, the works I talk about today are not from the WPA acquisition. Some are works from other important institutions, loans from private collections, and gifts like this one from collectors Ron and Monique Ollie in honor of Ron's parents, Thelma and Bert Ollie. This untitled graphite drawing is one of Norman Lewis's earlier abstract works with short, sketchy, vertical-oriented lines varying in thickness and shading, all leading into the center of the paper. Lewis's work in the 1930s was most often characterized as social realism, but by 1940, he realized that realistic depictions of troubled conditions weren't enough. For him, political and social aspects should not be the subject of a work alone. There had to be an aesthetic element that created a visual language of its own. His unique visual language established a new style of abstraction, and in 1946, he was invited to join Studio 35, a private group where abstract expressionists came together to discuss their work and other works surfacing during the late modern art era. Artists like Hans Hofmann, Robert Motherwell, Jackson Pollock, Ed Reinhardt, and several others aligned their views with those of New York's art critics, insisting that painting should solely be about materiality and expression. As the only Black artist invited to this group, I'm sure Norman Lewis was not easily understood as he voiced his ideologies around what painting should be and what they should accomplish. He used this kind of invisible man experience to his advantage by continuing to develop his mastery of abstraction, and his figural illusions began teetering on the edge of narrative and political themes. So he was able to veil his social statements within his work, making them visually universal while recording several attributes of Black American life. And by the end of the 1940s, Lewis emerged as the first major African-American member of the abstract expressionist era. Here's an untitled work where that Norman Lewis created early after his shift to abstraction that embodies the rejection of realist representation. As one of the first artists to engage in abstraction while still alluding to the figure, he capitalized on his freedom by experimenting with mark making all over the picture frame. Here, he's using spontaneous gestural brushwork and this black and white ink to build up an undefined figure or space. However, the plane of gravity isn't concrete and the center mass is undefined. A key aspect of his experimental method was the use of loose and organic shapes and marks, often from sources with personal meanings like music, writing, and references to Black life. I love to look at the marks up close. Like we see here, some of them seem to be paired up or skipping together, gathering together to form this shape in the middle of the page. I'm not sure what each of the figures is supposed to mean explicitly, but the beauty of abstract art is really interpreting these works for yourself. Lewis found an equilibrium between his concerns with social justice and more figurative human elements. And by the 1960s, he began painting with a predominantly all Black palette known as the Black Series, a body of work that was spanned for more than 30 years. Here is one work from the series called America the Beautiful. For this work and other works in the series, Lewis created a hue of Black pigment and painted it on an entire canvas that was white, but he was then leaving areas exposed to suggest hooded figures against the backdrop. He continued to explore issues surrounding civil rights movements in the 1960s and 70s. And in this expansive group of Black and white paintings, it was inspired by, in this expansive group of Black and white paintings evolving from his work themed specifically around the domestic terrorist organization, the Ku Klux Klan. Take Evening Rendezvous, for example. It is a deceptively beautiful painting. At the center of the canvas, brushstrokes of fiery red leap through vertically as a dense cloud of blue floats overhead. In the lower left corner, there are small white marks resembling figures moving in a syncopated cadence across this field of green pigments. The human-like forms and intense color evoke a gathering of a hate group at night. And although Lewis often said that art could not resolve the problems of society, Evening Rendezvous is a painting that speaks as a protest against these late night assemblies. Looking closer, the white marks take on cone shapes, hinting at figures dressed in white from head to toe, hooded figures who form a circle at the left side of the painting and in small clusters throughout. Meanwhile, the wispy reds and blues overlap and run together, saturating and engulfing the center and right side of the painting. The blue paint feels like smoke billowing over the red raging fires. And Lewis's use of vivid red, white, and blue is striking, in part because these are the colors associated with the United States flag, a chilling reminder of the normalization of American terrorism. As an African-American painter, he was expected to address Black issues, and abstraction often has no easily identifiable subject. His friends and family were not hearing it. They thought the work lacked political content, substance, meaning, and they low-key discouraged him from making abstract work through the 1950s. But he stood strong, and he believed that art should express personal feelings and visions. I mean, as we all know, when art truly speaks, you feel it. So as abstraction continued to take on the form of activism, and Norman Lewis was an outspoken supporter of socio-political change. He was a founding member of Spiral, a New York-based collective formed in 1963 by Black artists in response to and support of the March on Washington. By the late 1970s, Lewis had a distinctive style and was able to expand his subject matter from violence and struggle to other aspects of Black American life. Togetherness, the print that we see here, is a prime example of his successful merging of art and politics through his own expressive style. In Togetherness, dozens of overlapping shapes create a configuration of individuals walking or parading with a collective purpose. His quick gestural marks linking through the center suggests dispersing figures like a crowd of people making room for something to happen. This etching is not only a credit to his style, but also to his versatility in media. This is one of my favorite works in our collection by Norman Lewis, because as much as I want to see this free-forming shape, I cannot unsee a crowd and feel the close proximity of the people standing together and hear the bustling of the figures waiting for a speaker to rally them together. If we take a closer look at the details of this cylindrical shape, each gestural line is joined with another loosely, but as a whole, they have more weight, basically insinuating that we are stronger together. This etching of clean lines can only be produced by someone with extensive experience in printmaking, which takes years of technical training and experimental art making. It is subtle, but it is so impressive because the process of etching requires attention to detail, repetition, and ultimately patience. Here's another work reliant on line quality to imitate sound. In Jazz Band, made in 1948, Norman Lewis makes incisions onto a black-coated masonite board until these thin lines that suggest an explosion of sound from a jazz ensemble appear. It has a reductive quality from shaving that coating off to reveal the white lines. And in this work, Lewis was still bending the rules of abstraction by leaving a few instruments vaguely recognizable on the left side of the work. So the three works on paper that I mentioned in this presentation are in the museum's collection and can be viewed by making an appointment to visit our print study room. But this one, Twilight Sounds, is on view right now in our American galleries, along with paintings by Henry Ossaud Tanner, Charles White, Horace Pippin, Rohan Kright, and other African-American artists. Twilight Sounds is a busy little painting. It has strong shades of red, yellow, blue, and white that punctuate these intricate vertical black lines that are all confined in what we see is a square boundary. This is clearly an abstraction, and the title helps furthers the understanding of its effect. It's giving a live experience where the sounds of the crowd of people dancing and enjoying themselves happens in the evening, twilight, just as the sun goes down. Norman Lewis often compared his work process to the creativity and spontaneity of jazz composition, improvising and riffing off of what had previously been laid down on the canvas. So we see these energetic entanglements of lines that could mimic the sounds of a wind instrument climbing through a scale, possibly joined by another instrument, maybe a saxophone whose sounds weave through in red, and maybe a bass drum, whose kicks are the dark spaces. Twilight Sounds was painted during a pivotal period in Lewis's career, creating a number of legendary works that are revisited in lectures and research and discussed still around the world. I think Norman Lewis paved the way for artists like Glenn Ligon, Sam Gilliam, Oliver Lee Jackson, all working in conceptual and or non-figurative imagery, who acknowledged the plight of the Black man in society, but also defied the cultural expectations for what a painting had to be. Where these artists used artist activism, I think Norman Lewis used activism as art. He found a way to elevate his voice through his persistent pursuit for racial equality and the fight against racism. The work he did on canvas was a model for the contributions he made in his community. Norman Lewis's work has a unique duality of abstraction and representation, using both geometric and natural forms while expressing righteous anger and joyous celebration. I mean, it's genius. I think he's using these holographic lines to overtly highlight the vivid realities of American hatred, and stress the importance and beauty of Black folks coming together, all translated into a surface that looks like music and or music. I hope this discussion inspires you all, like Norman Lewis, to use every experience in your life to create opportunities and impact causes that are important to you and that help your community. I encourage you all, especially the Black folks watching, to go harder, be more vigilant, persistent, and intentional in your pursuits towards your goals, and let your impact, like many of our ancestors, ring loud and proud, because when our art speaks, they hear us. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaka. That's fantastic. So if folks have questions, I encourage you to type them into the Q&A section, and I will look at those in a moment. But first, I wanted to ask Shaka, so what was it exactly that drew you to researching more about Norman Lewis specifically?
There are several things. On site, Norman Lewis and many other male artists aren't as widely recognized, especially through maybe the Bearden Fellowship. If you all recall, or if you've watched other Art Speaks, our fellows and many of my colleagues enjoy and really want to promote Black women artists. And I do agree that Black women are usually undersung heroes in the art world. But I really thought it was important to highlight Black artists who work in abstract forms, because abstract art is often feels unreachable to Black communities and to, an average viewer. Norman Lewis in this work that we see on the screen, Twilight Sounds, actually ties in really perfectly to a program that you see on the screen celebrating Juneteenth, Black Music Month, where I will be on site for our first Juneteenth program, discussing Black music and its impact on the world. A little plug about this while we're here. Thank you, Jessica. The program takes place Friday, June 16th. That's a Juneteenth weekend. And as I stated, it is the museum's first ever Juneteenth celebration on site. I will discuss a recent acquisition from a local collection, and it's a very unique portfolio of drawings and musical scores. The drawings by native St. Louis artist Oliver Lee Jackson, and the musical scores by the late Julius Hemphill. We'll also have a special guest from the National Blues Museum to join us to talk more about the Black Artist Group, which was founded here in St. Louis and was, live during the 1970s. And there will be a special musical performance that you all won't want to miss. So I encourage you all to come on site June 16th for our Juneteenth program and learn more about Oliver Lee Jackson, see the Norman Lewis painting, and experience the thrills of Black music.
Well, and I also wanted to ask and point out if you could show us the rest of your shirt.
Oh, yes, this is my shirt from the Hammond Museum in Atlanta, Georgia. It has a list of some renowned Black artists. We have Romare Bearden, Jacob Lawrence, Charles White, Bill Traylor, Robert Duncanson. We have one of his works on view at the St. Louis Art Museum, James Vanderzee and Hale Woodruff, all pillars, all moguls, men in the Black art world. They're true legacies. And I love this shirt as a Bearden Fellow.
Perfect. All right, so we do have one question. Someone has asked, was Lewis considered commercially successful in his lifetime?
In his lifetime, no. He actually did not receive international recognition to the caliber that he should have until after his death. He began receiving several awards. After he passed, but during his career, he did receive national recognition in a world of abstract expressionism, being honored, by the Guggenheim and, the MoMA, but those populations were geared towards a white audience. So he was not promoted as an amazing Black artist, and not really, he didn't receive his flowers while he was living, unfortunately. But as people continue to research and learn more about his abstract work, I think that we're finding subtle nuances of things outside of Black oppression and music, and really learning to respect his line quality and just this freedom to express himself and connect to the viewer in whatever way they choose.
Do you know if he made a living off of his art at any point solely?
I am not 100% sure, but based on my research and that research highlighting a lot of his activism and his contributions to the community, while he was working with Alston in Studio 306, they made it a point to work hard with the WPA and the Federal Arts Project to create opportunities for Black artists. I do know that Alston was able to make a living off of his work within the community. And I'd assume that, and just based on research, I assume that towards the end of his career, yes, Norman Lewis was solely a painter, especially after being invited to that group, the Studio 35. In reality, once you receive recognition from, the non-BIPOC world in that time, you essentially got your stamp of approval. And from there, I know that he was revered as an amazing artist and Black artist in this kind of late modern era, moving into what would be contemporary art later on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great, thank you. Let's see, we have another question here. A couple questions. How much do we know about Lewis's tastes in music? Did he talk about specific musicians? Did he write about music?
He did not. Now, scholars, researchers, graduate students, as I was one, we will draw inferences to anything we can. I think he was so focused on social justice that, the reason he moved away from, the realist work and depicting African Americans and, factories and working is because he really wanted to focus on social justice. And I do know that he was inspired by jazz music, hence the names of this painting, Twilight Sound, Jazz Band, and several others. And he was a part of that collective, the Studio 306, where, as I mentioned, Ralph Ellison was a member, and during the Harlem Renaissance in general, he was born and raised in kind of the mecca of Black culture during the 1920s and 30s, where several musicians, intellects, and Black visual artists came up. So he was a part of that major group, friends with several artists and writers who influenced his work. I would assume that it is jazz music specifically that he would be inspired by, based on the work that I see, and based on, again, some of the titles of his paintings and inclusions of instruments and things, just subtle moments. So
yeah, great. All right, let's see. We actually have a comment here, which I would love to share. Thank you to the St. Louis Art Museum, and thank you, Shaka, for providing educational experiences, especially through the Art Speaks series. All three parts have given me a direction in my informal art studies into abstract, impressionist, and expressionist art genres. So all three of those have helped.
well, thank you. I'm so glad that you can feel me, see me, and hear me.
Yeah. Perfect.
Thank you.
All right, let's see. Oh, we got one more. We got about a couple minutes here. So was there tension between Black abstraction expressionists and Black artists whose work more directly visually engaged with racial and social difference? Do you feel that there was an idea that Black art had to be one thing?
Absolutely, as my supervisor would say. Tension, nomenclature. But I think there was a slight divide. If you all can imagine, these abstract artists are thinking and making work completely outside of the box, where a certain intellect would respect it, they feared it, they didn't know if it would become successful. Take, for example, Sam Gilliam's work, where he said, okay, if this is a painting, I'm just going to take the canvas, throw paint on it, crumble it, and we're going to hang it, his drape painting. So he's another artist who did not really receive his flowers. Well, he did towards the end of his life because he recently passed, but he wasn't really recognized in his time. But I find that that's how most artists, rappers, creators, writers, you don't come into an art world or any type of creative world with like a green light stamp. And some of the beauty is really fighting for your voice and for your style and your story to be heard. So the question is, was there tension? I think there was a bit of discomfort because, of course, as a Black American, we are often subjugated or we are supposed to focus on our struggle. It is the common theme that Black people have, the struggle of being Black. And where Norman Lewis still felt that struggle was very important to really explore, he wanted to take the obvious visual elements out. I also believe that the shift to abstract art helped him enter a different area, a different group of artists, those abstract expressionists. But then again, once he was in that group of these all white guys, he's telling them, no, my work, I still need to have these hints of, the Black struggle and power and togetherness, and also call you all out on your racism, with the Ku Klux Klan, that whole 30-year series, where he got acclaim and was able to move into that group. He was still in some ways isolated, again, as the only Black artist of this abstract expressionist, really powerful group of people. So it is honestly a yes, a no, and then a yes again, which is a similar experience, because Black people and Black experiences are not a monolith. They come from all types of cultures and stories and experiences. So I think he got it all. And he made the best of it, literally the best.
Yeah, thank you. All right, well, thank you, Shaka, for this fantastic presentation and for all three of your presentations. And thanks to everyone who joined us today. I know there's some other events coming up at the museum, so Shaka, would you mind sharing a little bit more about them?
There are. I plugged the Black Music Month, which I'm extremely excited about, but I also wanted to let you all know that women are extremely powerful and impactful in artist communities. As I mentioned, Augusta Savage really took Norman Lewis under her wing. So in pre-celebration for Women's History Month, which starts tomorrow, I'd like to remind you all that if it wasn't for the women, Grounded Perspectives will be on site here at the St. Louis Art Museum and Farrell Auditorium, March 18th at 11 a.m. You will be able to join my cohort as she talks about, well, she's celebrating women of color in the arts and exploring depictions of landscapes using 3 artists and focusing on how their relationships to the environment inform their practice. So as we move out of Black History Month, which I'm a part of, we get to move into Women's History Month, which I'm a part of. So I hope you all join us for both of those programs. And to find out more, you can visit slam.org. Be sure to register. And I hope to see you all in person soon. Happy Black History Month.
Thanks so much, Shaka.